Hello knitters, Barbara Benson here. I'm an independent knitwear designer who also likes to make videos here on my YouTube channel, Watch Barbara Knit. Make sure to check in the description notes below the video where you will find links to all of my online shenanigans, including how to get my patterns to knit up for yourself, how to join the Watch Barbara Knit Facebook group, how to support me on Patreon, and where to get Watch Barbara Knit merchandise. Today we have a little bit of a talking video. I'm just here to chat, and it is like a combo of a couple different things. So one, we're going to revisit a previous video that I made that again was discussing something in the knitting industry, and it was called Are Knitwear Designers Out Here Stealing from Each Other or something like that. I will link in the description notes below, but also I will do the thing where it drops down up here so that you can hopefully click the card and go to that. And it's going to go a lot more in depth into how it's not uncommon for knitwear designers to develop very similar patterns, completely separate from one another. Like they didn't see the other person's thing, but it's easy to have like a convergent thing where two designers end up designing things that look very similar, at least on the surface. So if you want to know more about that, go to that other video. Now, the second thing is at the end of last Thursday of each month, when, I'm in town, I do a live. I'd love to have you come join a live stream. It's usually a little over an hour, and we chat about all kinds of things. And sometimes the chat goes by very quickly, and there's multiple questions because I call it Ask Me Anything Knitting Fiber, but I also get questions on other things, and I'll try to catch them as they go by. And sometimes I make a mental note to revisit that thing, and then I get sidetracked by something else, and I never manage to circle back to it. And this is me circling back to something was said in that chat during the live stream at the end of September. And it's going to be something that I'm pretty sure is going to engender some disagreement, because honestly, I'm not sure how I feel about this subject, and I want to open up discussion on it. I am more than happy to entertain respectful disagreement and debate in the comments once this goes live, because I want to talk about something that hopefully will spur some thoughts that maybe you haven't run into before. And the thing is I actually went back because I record, and you can go back and watch the live streams, and I have the button clicked so you can see the live replay, and I tried to go through it and see if I could pull out so you could see the actual statement that the person made or the question that the person asked, and I could figure out who asked it, but I tried and I couldn't figure out where it was. It is also possible to retract a statement, so it might have disappeared. I don't know. I couldn't find it, but the general idea of this question / statement / observation that was made in the chat of the live stream was referring to designers who publish or post in social media about an upcoming pattern, who have it pointed out to them on social media that it looks remarkably similar to, or that's someone being nice, or people who just straight out come out and accuse the designer of stealing someone else's design or knocking off someone else's design. And this has happened a couple times in the last few months. And what the commenter in the live stream was saying, that they really respected the choice of the designer who has had this brought to their attention, then choosing to either retract or not publish that pattern in question. And I understand and can totally see that that being a really positive thing. If someone has inadvertently really created a duplicate of an existing pattern, then respectfully saying, oh, you know what, I didn't know about that. I'm going to not publish this pattern. I'm going to not sell that pattern. That is really that's a choice that you can make, and it is a very respectful choice. And I want to make it clear to the person, because I couldn't find your name, who made this observation, that I totally understand and validate your thoughts and feelings on the matter of that being a positive thing. But I want to discuss something that brings a little bit of nuance to this idea that, well, several things that bring nuance. The idea of, if someone puts on social media, here's what my new pattern is going to look at like, and then there are people in the comments who are like, well, that's just a knockoff of this pattern. The person who did the new pattern is like, oh, well, I just won't publish it then. Because there's a lot of nuance that I would like to encourage people to consider. And again, I don't know that I'm trying to change anybody's mind, and I honestly don't know precisely how I feel about it, but there are a lot of things that went through my mind when I saw this happening. And this is me kind of going out on a limb to share this, but I really feel it's important to point out. And again, go back to our designers out here stealing each other's designs, the not uncommon occurrence of people designing things that on the surface look very similar, but when you get into them are dissimilar in many ways. They may have a different yarn weight, they may have a different size range, they may have a different construction that is not immediately obvious. Just because it uses the same stitch pattern doesn't mean it's a knockoff or something like that. And another thing to consider is, it's not just the end result that you're buying when you buy a pattern, but you're also buying the pattern instructions. And different designers, if you gave multiple designers the exact same design and asked them to write a pattern for it, if you gave 5 different people, most of the time you would have 5 different sets of instructions. And then if you gave those 5 sets of instructions to hundreds of different knitters, some of them would find some of those patterns easier to follow than others, because people's brains work differently and patterns writing style clicks with different people. So it is entirely valid to have 2 very similar looking patterns that are written in very different styles, because different people are going to be able to like grok the instructions in different ways. But that's not number 1 on my thing. Things that I would like to throw into the discussion pile about this whole idea of retracting or not unpublishing, or just not publishing a pattern. That is a big part. If it's simply the designer publishing it on social media and people in the comments going, well, that's the exact same thing as this other thing, maybe it's not, because honestly, I've been on the receiving end of that. I published a very simple a deceptively simple scarf pattern, and I had people accuse me of ripping off a very big name designer. And the thing is while on the surface they looked similar, they weren't. Mine was reversible, theirs wasn't. Mine started and ended, it like went and could go forever. Theirs had a framing structure. They were different patterns, but since they were both so simple, they looked similar. So allowing that, or saying that, yes, the social media critics are just giving them the weight and saying, yes, they're right, this is a knockoff, they might not be right. Someone who just looks at the 2 pictures of the 2 patterns on Ravelry, they're not necessarily seeing all of the finesse and detail of it. So they might not be even as similar as they visually appear. But what I wanted to talk about, and I've said that several times because I'm a little nervous about this, is what has to have happened for a designer to get to the point that they are publishing a photograph of a finished piece on social media saying, this is my next pattern, this is coming out. So they had to come up with the idea, most of the time buy or source the yarn, which that is a whole nother thing. If they've received pattern yarn support for that pattern, that means that a yarn dyer has given them that yarn, and the expectation is they are going to publish a pattern in that yarn. It's a quid pro quo kind of situation. Quid pro quo. I said quid pro quo, which would involve birds, and that's not what I meant. It's like caw, caw. So they've gotten the yarn. They've had to knit the thing. Depending on how many photographs you see, they may have had sample knitters. They may have had to pay sample knitters. They may have gone through an entire test knitting process and had multiple people test it with the expectation that they were going to be able to publish that and publicize that they did this piece and put it on social media and put it on Ravelry or what have you. They're going to have, I think I said knit it, but I mean simply the amount of time invested in knitting the piece or multiple versions of the piece, depending if it's sized, or paying people to buy most. And then they had to write the pattern. Then they had to have the pattern tech edited, which is a financial outlay. They may have had to pay a photographer to photograph the piece or pieces. There's a whole process that represents a substantial investment in both money and time and labor, and frequently with many people involved, be it a yarn dyer, a test knitter, a sample knitter. There's a lot that goes to bringing a pattern to publication, bringing it to the point that we are ready to put this picture on social media. And to retract that pattern at that point is a substantial financial hit on the designer. And depending on the designer, it could be crippling. It could be the difference between them being able to continue to design and them having to close their business. Being a designer who is at the level that you are making enough money and you have enough patterns in the pipeline and you have the ability to pull that pattern and say, I am going to literally discard upwards of 6 months of work because it looks like somebody else's pattern. Not everyone has that privilege. Not every designer has the ability to take that financial hit. There are a lot of designers out there who design, and these are professional designers. These are good designers, but making a living designing patterns and selling patterns is actually really not easy. And there's a very relatively small number of designers who actually make their full-time living at selling patterns. Most of them have quote unquote day jobs. Now, a lot of them have day jobs that are still in the fiber industry. They own a yarn store, they own a yarn company, they sell bags, they sell any number of things. They do a lot of traveling and teaching, but there's a very, very large percentage of really good knitwear designers who still have a full-time job in a non-fiber industry, and they have to do all of the stuff I talked about, all of the development, design, and knitting and everything. They do that essentially as a second job. They are doing it in the times that they are not working their 9 to 5. They are investing their after hours. They're investing the time after their family has gone to bed and they're staying up late. They're investing their weekends. They're investing all of this time and effort and money, which is why someone who has reached the point where they're really doing it as their full-time job can truncate the process and have more patterns coming out because they can invest all that time. But there are a lot of really good designers out there that are only putting out somewhere in the 6 to 12 patterns a year. And all of those patterns are in different stage of development as they go. And to take that one that you've spent all this time and all this money and all this labor and all this effort getting to publication point, and then because people on social media say, that looks exactly like this other pattern, not everybody has the ability to simply say, oh, I'll just throw that in the garbage and start the process all over again. I mean, it's just something that came to I thought that maybe not everybody would think about that because they're not a designer and they don't really understand everything that goes into designing. So while yes, if the designer is in a position that retracting that pattern, that they completely inadvertently designed to be very similar to an existing pattern, if they can afford that hit, then yes, removing it from market and saying, I just respectfully don't want to put this out there. It wasn't on purpose, but I'm just not going to publish it. That is wonderful that they can do that. But I worry that if that becomes the expectation, that there becomes an expectation that anytime someone challenges a designer's pattern as to its originality, the expectation is they're going to pull that pattern. We could drive a lot of designers out of business. We could take a young designer who is up and coming, who is just getting their feet under them, and deal them a blow to their business that we're not going to get to see what that person might have designed in the future because they just financially can't afford to take that kind of hit. So that that is what was in my brain about that whole situation. Do I 100% respect the designers who have chosen to retract their patterns? Yes, that is their right. It is a kind and respectful thing to do. But will I disrespect a designer who is in a position that they can't retract the pattern, that too much has been committed to that pattern for them to simply pull it because people on social media say it's a knockoff? I don't want that to happen. I don't want someone to be hurt in that way. Assuming, of course, that we're talking about this inadvertent coevolution of designs that look similar but aren't really the same. I do not want anyone to misconstrue anything I've said to be condoning knocking off other people's patterns, because I don't really think that is a good choice. I'm not gonna be like cheerleaders for those people. That is not what I'm saying here. I'm just saying that I'd like people to consider a bunch of the nuances involved in this particular subject matter. So if you're the person who made that comment in the live stream, I really hope that I've tried to approach this discussion respectfully, and I hope that you're seeing it in the way I mean it, just to add food for thought, to think about all the different things that could be going on in these sorts of situations. Again, I'm not critiquing your statement. I validate your statement. There's just more going on that I think that we all could stand to think about. And I would welcome any additional thoughts in the comments, things that I haven't thought about, like angles that I haven't looked at, because it is a complex issue. So as I said, it was a lot of talking. It was about knitting. If you have any things you'd like to talk to me about, or questions that you might have that might spark another one of these rambling videos, if you like this kind of video, please let me know in the comments. And if you like this video, please give it the thumbs up, click that like button. And if you would like to be notified whenever I upload a new video, please subscribe to my channel and select notifications. Thank you so much.